Have you ever trusted someone with everything, only to have them shatter your world? For 30 years, Michael Donovan had built a life that seemed as solid as rock, a successful businessman, a loving father, and a husband to Rachel, the woman he thought was his soulmate. Together, they had crafted what appeared to be the perfect marriage. They had shared countless moments of joy, raised 2 children in a safe and loving home, and forged a partnership that many would have envied. But as Michael would soon discover, everything he thought he knew was a carefully constructed illusion. Their life in Ashford, a quiet town nestled just outside the city, was everything Michael had ever wanted. Rachel, his high school sweetheart, was his anchor. She was the picture of grace, balanced, composed, and endlessly devoted to their family. They had built a home filled with laughter, love, and the promise of a bright future. But there was something Michael couldn't quite shake, an unsettling feeling, a nagging thought that something was amiss. It wasn't something he could put into words at first, but the cracks began to show. Rachel, once so warm and engaged, seemed distant at times. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. But when you're living in a house built on trust, a slight shift in the foundation is enough to make you question everything. What started as a small discomfort grew into something far more profound. Michael's once secure world started to tremble at the edges. His thoughts drifted to places he never wanted to explore. What could be lurking behind the smile Rachel had worn for all those years? What was she hiding? It wasn't until a trip to the mountains meant to rekindle their bond that Michael stumbled upon a clue that would change everything. A letter that would unravel everything he thought he knew about his wife. Welcome to the True Crime Journal HQ. If you're new here, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories like this. For my existing subscribers, I thank you all for being loyal to me. Michael Donovan's life was the kind that many people dream of, successful, stable, and full of promise. By all outward appearances, he had it all: a flourishing law firm, a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a marriage to a woman who seemed to be everything he had ever wanted. Rachel, his wife of 30 years, was the epitome of grace. She was the kind of woman who made everything look effortless, balancing a thriving career, volunteer work, and the role of a devoted mother and wife. Together they had built a life in Ashford, a quiet suburban town where the streets were lined with trees and the neighborhood was the kind of place where you could raise children without worry. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other's names, and the sun seemed to shine just a little bit brighter. Michael couldn't have asked for a better place to raise his family. Rachel, in particular, was the anchor of their family. A mother who seemed to have everything under control, she made the difficult task of raising children look easy. From the outside, everything about their marriage appeared perfect. They attended every parent-teacher meeting, celebrated birthdays, and spent holidays with extended family. There was always laughter in their home, and the shared memories of vacations, family dinners, and simple moments seemed to define their life together. But as the years passed, Michael began to sense something unsettling, though he couldn't put his finger on it. At first it was small, just a feeling he couldn't shake. Rachel's warm smiles were becoming less frequent, and when she did smile, it often seemed forced. Her once enthusiastic attention to their family dinners and weekends together started to wane. Michael noticed how she seemed more distracted, more distant, as though her mind was elsewhere even when they were in the same room. It wasn't just the quiet moments either. There was the subtle shift in Rachel's behavior that began to eat at Michael's peace of mind. Late nights at work became more frequent, often with vague explanations for why she couldn't come home at a reasonable hour. The family was always on the receiving end of her best efforts, but Michael began to wonder whether the woman he was living with was truly the same woman he had married all those years ago. He tried to ignore the creeping doubts that began to rise. Surely, he reasoned, everything was just fine. After all, they were still a family, still sharing meals and planning for the future. But the unease grew with each passing day. At times, he would return home after long days at the office to find Rachel still on the couch, her gaze fixed on something unseen in the distance. Their conversations, once filled with light banter and shared dreams, started to feel more like polite exchanges. Michael found himself questioning everything. He couldn't pinpoint what was wrong, but there was a growing sense that the perfect life he thought they had built together was somehow not as solid as he had once believed. Have you ever felt like something was off but couldn't put your finger on it? It was a feeling that Michael could no longer ignore. As he went through the motions of his day-to-day life, attending meetings, handling business matters, and spending time with the children, his mind constantly returned to Rachel. Her absence, her distance, loomed larger than any of the everyday concerns that filled his schedule. What was happening to his marriage? Was this a phase, or was something deeper at play? For the first time in years, Michael began to wonder if there was more to his life than the surface he had been so carefully protecting. In an attempt to reconnect and rekindle the spark that seemed to have faded over the years, Michael and Rachel planned a family trip to the mountains. It had been their tradition to get away once in a while, to take a break from their routine, escape the pressures of work and life and focus on their relationship. They rented a secluded cabin, tucked away in the woods, far from the distractions of everyday life. The cabin was exactly what they needed. The crisp mountain air, the towering pine trees and the peaceful silence offered the perfect backdrop for reflection and reconnection. Michael was hopeful that this trip would bring them closer. Perhaps it would help them rediscover the bond they once shared, the one that had drawn them together in the first place. It was supposed to be a chance to reset, a time for family and for rekindling the intimacy that had long been overshadowed by their busy lives. At first, things seemed to go according to plan. The children, Liam and Sophie, were delighted to be surrounded by nature. The days were filled with hikes, campfires, and playful games. Even Michael and Rachel seemed to relax a little, laughing together, enjoying the simple pleasures of being away from their usual routine. But as the days passed, Michael began to sense a subtle shift. Rachel was still distant, and her smiles, though present, were laced with an unfamiliar sadness. She seemed distracted, as if her mind was a million miles away. Michael's concerns deepened, but he pushed them aside, convincing himself it was just the stress of daily life catching up with her. One evening after the children had gone to bed, Michael and Rachel sat on the porch of the cabin sipping wine under the stars. The moment was peaceful, yet Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The crackling of the fire and the distant chirping of crickets were comforting, but the tension between them was palpable. As they sat there, Michael couldn't help but notice the letter on the small wooden table next to Rachel. It was folded neatly, its edges slightly worn, as if it had been opened and closed several times. Michael's gaze lingered on it for a moment longer than necessary before his curiosity got the best of him. He reached over, picking it up without a word, and saw that it was unsigned. The letter was short, but its contents hit him like a freight train. There were no names, only words that seemed charged with longing and secrecy. The letter spoke of promises to meet again, of shared memories, and of a future that didn't involve Michael. The tone was intimate, almost too personal, and the words painted a picture of something much deeper than he had expected. He turned the letter over, hoping to find some explanation, but it was blank on the other side. It didn't make sense. Why had Rachel kept it, and why had she left it out in the open, so easily accessible? His heart raced as the realization slowly dawned on him. Something was terribly wrong. The trust he had placed in his wife seemed to crumble before his eyes. He couldn't bring himself to believe it. This letter, this piece of paper, was all he had, and yet it was enough to make him question everything. Rachel had always been the picture of loyalty, the epitome of devotion. She had been the wife, the mother, the partner. Yet here in his hands was undeniable proof of a secret she had been hiding. He stared at the letter, feeling the weight of the words sinking into his chest. When Rachel returned from the kitchen, Michael didn't hesitate. "Rachel," he said, his voice tight. "What is this?" Rachel froze. Her face paled, and the air between them seemed to thicken. Michael could see the tremor in her hands as she reached for the letter. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and confidence, were now clouded with guilt. She didn't speak at first, her silence hanging in the air like a thick fog. Michael repeated his question, his frustration rising. "What is this, Rachel? Why didn't you tell me about this?" Rachel took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for you to find that." She paused, as though searching for the right words. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." Michael's heart sank as he processed her words. A mistake? Was that all it was? His mind raced. Why had she kept this letter? Why had she kept the affair a secret for so long? How long had it been going on, and how had he not seen it? The silence stretched between them, suffocating and heavy. Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had always believed in Rachel, trusted her without question. But this was something else entirely. The realization that the woman he had built his life with, the woman he had entrusted with his heart, had been living a double life for years, hit him with a force that left him reeling. Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she struggled to find the words to explain. "I didn't know how to tell you," she confessed, her voice quivering. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael, but I've been living a lie. There's so much you don't know." Michael's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced, but the words wouldn't come. His thoughts were a jumble of anger, confusion, and disbelief. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, had betrayed him. This wasn't just a mistake. It was something much deeper, something much darker. What would you do if you found a letter from your spouse to someone else? How would you react? Have you ever experienced betrayal like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. The silence in the cabin was suffocating, the weight of Rachel's confession hanging heavy in the air. Michael sat frozen, the letter still clutched in his hands, his mind struggling to process the flood of emotions threatening to overtake him. What had Rachel done? What had been going on behind the life they had built together? Rachel took a shaky breath, the tears welling in her eyes, betraying the calm facade she had tried to maintain. She couldn't hide anymore, and she knew it. This was the moment Michael had been waiting for, the truth that had been buried for years, now rising to the surface. "I never wanted to hurt you," Rachel began, her voice faltering. "But there's something I've kept from you for a long time, something I've been running from." Michael's heart beat faster as the reality of the situation settled over him. He had expected the affair, perhaps, but nothing could have prepared him for the depth of the revelation he was about to hear. Rachel continued, her words slow and painful. "It wasn't just one mistake, Michael. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It's been going on for years, and I—" She stopped, her hands trembling. "I was never truly in love with you, Michael. Not the way you think." The truth hit Michael like a wave, knocking the breath out of him. His mind raced, struggling to make sense of what Rachel was saying. She had never loved him. The woman he had trusted, the woman who had stood beside him through everything, his partner, his confidant, the mother of his children, had never felt the way he thought she did. He had always believed that their marriage was built on mutual love and respect, but now in this moment, he was forced to confront the painful reality that Rachel had been living a life of quiet discontent, trapped in a marriage that, to her, had never been more than an obligation. She had stayed for the family's sake, for the children, for the picture of the perfect family life they had created. But it had come at a price, one Michael had never imagined. Rachel's eyes filled with guilt, and she reached for his hand, but Michael pulled away. His mind was racing, trying to process everything she had just said. The betrayal was deeper than he could have ever fathomed. Not only had she been unfaithful, but she had never truly loved him. All those years they had spent together, all the memories, the shared experiences, had they all been lies? "I never wanted you to know, Michael," Rachel said softly, her voice breaking. "But I couldn't keep hiding it from you anymore. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make up for, and I hate myself for it." But the affair was only the beginning of the truth Rachel had been hiding. As if the weight of her words hadn't been enough, she continued, revealing even darker secrets. "There's more," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Victor Hawke, he's not just someone I had an affair with. He's involved in something much worse." Victor Hawke. The name was familiar to Michael. Victor had once been a business partner of his, a colleague he had trusted. They had shared ambitions, had worked together on multiple projects, and at one point, Michael had even considered Victor a close friend. But years ago, Victor had disappeared from the business world, and Michael had lost touch with him. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now, hearing Rachel's words, the realization hit him like a punch. Rachel continued, her voice low and filled with regret. "Victor wasn't just a lover to me, Michael. He got involved in things, criminal things, things I should have never been a part of, but I couldn't get out. I was trapped." Rachel's confession unraveled further as she explained how she had become entangled in Victor's dangerous world. What started as a brief affair had spiraled into something much darker. Victor had pulled Rachel into a criminal underworld that she hadn't known how to escape. Victor had ties to organized crime, using his influence to run a network of illegal activities, drug trafficking, money laundering, and various other shady dealings. Rachel, in her desperation and feeling trapped by a life she felt she couldn't escape, had been pulled into Victor's schemes. She had become involved in the operations, helping him move money, covering up his tracks, and even aiding in some of the criminal activities. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Michael felt as if the floor had been pulled out from under him. Not only had Rachel betrayed him with Victor, but she had also been complicit in a world that threatened their safety, their family's future, and everything they had worked for. How had he missed it? How had he failed to see that the woman he trusted had been living a life of lies, wrapped in a facade of normalcy? Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she spoke the painful truth. "I never wanted this life, Michael. I never wanted to drag you into this, but I was scared. I didn't know how to stop. And now, I've lost everything." Michael sat there in stunned silence, unable to process the enormity of what Rachel was telling him. His mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. All the late nights, the emotional distance, the strange behavior, it all made sense now, but it was too much to take in. Rachel had been living a double life, and he had never seen it. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with everything, had been hiding a dark, dangerous secret. The betrayal was deeper than infidelity. It was a life built on deceit, manipulation, and fear. Can you imagine loving someone for years only to realize they were living a completely different life? What do you think Michael should do now? Share your thoughts on Betrayal in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories. Michael's world had already been shattered, but as Rachel's confession unraveled, a deeper darkness began to emerge, one that Michael had never imagined, let alone thought possible. The affair, the lies, the emotional betrayal, these were painful, but what Rachel revealed next would forever change his perception of her and their life together. The following days were a blur for Michael. His thoughts spun out of control as he tried to process what he had just learned. The person he had trusted most, the woman he had shared his life with for 30 years, had been involved in something far beyond infidelity. The affair with Victor Hawke was only the tip of the iceberg, and now Michael had to face the reality of just how deep Rachel had been entrenched in a world of crime. Unable to let the matter rest, Michael embarked on his own investigation, driven by a need for the full truth. Rachel's words echoed in his mind. "I was trapped." But Michael wasn't sure if it was fear or manipulation that had kept Rachel in the web she had spun. He needed answers, answers that would finally reveal the full extent of the lies that had controlled their marriage for so long. His first step was to track down Victor Hawke, a man he hadn't thought about in years. Victor had disappeared from Michael's life after a falling out in the business world, but now Michael couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that Victor had been far more than just a business associate. He had been a catalyst for Rachel's descent into a dangerous world, a world that Michael had never even considered. After a few sleepless nights, Michael finally found a lead. Victor's name appeared in connection with several criminal investigations, drug trafficking operations, money laundering, and other illicit activities. The more Michael dug, the more he discovered. Victor had been using his business ventures as a front for a larger criminal network. And Rachel, the woman who had stood beside him in every aspect of his life, had been complicit in it all. Rachel had been living a double life, one that Michael could never have imagined. While he was working long hours at the law firm, attending meetings and attending family events, Rachel had been playing the perfect wife, concealing the fact that she was involved in criminal operations. She had been helping Victor with money laundering schemes, moving large sums of cash, covering up illegal transactions, and even handling logistics for drug trafficking. Michael's stomach churned as the pieces of this dangerous puzzle came together. Rachel hadn't just been a passive participant in Victor's criminal world, she had been an active accomplice. She had hidden this part of herself from him, allowing him to believe that their marriage, their life, had been as perfect as it appeared on the outside. She had played the role of the loving wife, mother, and career woman, while secretly working alongside a man who had been manipulating her into a criminal lifestyle. The realization that Rachel had been living such a dangerous, hidden existence was more than Michael could bear. How could he not have seen the signs? How could he have missed the warnings that were right in front of him? The late nights, the odd behavior, the emotional distance. It had all been there, but he had never imagined that it was tied to something so dangerous. Victor's criminal activities were vast and far-reaching. He was deeply involved in drug networks, moving narcotics across state lines, laundering money through shell companies, and exerting influence over various illicit markets. Rachel had been an unwitting pawn in his game, but as Michael learned, she had become more than just a bystander. She had become an active player, willingly helping Victor with the logistics of the operation, covering up his tracks, and keeping his secrets safe from the authorities. Michael was left grappling with the staggering revelation that Rachel had not only betrayed him emotionally, but had also put their entire family at risk. Her actions, her involvement in Victor's world, had threatened everything they had built together. Every moment he had spent with Rachel, every family gathering, every conversation, every "I love you," felt like a lie. The woman he had loved and trusted had been part of something far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. Rachel, the mother of his children, had willingly walked into a dark world, one that had ultimately ensnared her, pulling her further away from him, from their life together, and from any semblance of trust. The discovery was as painful as it was disorienting. Michael's perception of Rachel had completely shifted. She was no longer the loving wife he thought she was. She was now someone he barely recognized, a woman trapped in a world of crime and deceit. She had been lying to him for years, living in a shadow world where betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. As Michael processed these revelations, a question began to haunt him. How had Rachel justified her actions all this time? How had she been able to live two lives, one filled with love and family, and the other with darkness and deceit? Michael struggled to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the woman he was now learning about. It was a shift that would forever change his view of their marriage, their family, and the very foundation of trust they had built together. The weight of these discoveries was almost too much for Michael to bear. He had always been a man who valued truth and integrity above all else, but now he was left questioning everything. The woman he had loved, the woman who had been the mother of his children, had been living a lie, one that put them all in danger. The anger Michael felt was palpable, but so was his confusion. Was Rachel a victim of circumstance, or was she as guilty as Victor in the web of crime that had consumed her? And what would happen now? What was Michael supposed to do with all this information? Have you ever learned something about someone that changed your entire perception of them? What do you think Michael should do now? Should he confront Rachel again or walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments and make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. The weight of everything Michael had uncovered hung in the air as he walked into the house, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. It was the calm before the storm. Every part of him wanted to scream, to lash out at Rachel, to demand answers for the betrayal he had uncovered. But as he reached the living room, he found her sitting there, as calm as ever, though her eyes gave her away. Rachel knew that the moment of reckoning had come. Michael had waited for this confrontation, rehearsed it in his mind 1,000 times. But now, as he stood in front of the woman he had once loved, everything felt different. The anger that had built up over the past few days began to mix with something else, something more painful than he could have ever imagined. The confusion, the disbelief, the heartbreak. They all swirled together, making it impossible to form a single coherent thought. "Rachel," he said, his voice cold but steady, "we need to talk." Rachel's eyes flickered with fear, but she didn't look away. She knew this was coming. She had seen the change in him, the way his gaze had hardened, the way his movements had become more tense. She had been waiting for this moment, and now it was finally here. Michael took a deep breath. He couldn't hold back anymore. He needed her to know that he knew everything. "Do you know what I've learned?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know what I know about you and Victor? About the lies? About the criminal life you've been living behind my back?" Rachel's face paled, and she opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. She knew there was no point in pretending anymore. There was no more hiding behind smiles and lies. Michael had uncovered it all, and now the truth was out in the open. "I never wanted you to find out," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted you to see me like this." Michael's heart ached as he watched her. He wanted to feel anger, to feel the rage that had been building inside him for so long, but all he felt now was sorrow. Sorrow for the woman he had thought was his soulmate, for the mother of his children, for the life they had built together. "Why, Rachel?" he asked, his voice strained. "Why did you do this? You were everything to me. I trusted you. You were the one person I thought I could count on. Why did you have to hide this from me? Why did you choose him over us?" Rachel looked at him, her eyes filled with guilt and regret. "I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. I never meant to betray you. But I was so lost. I felt trapped in a life I never asked for. You wanted the perfect wife, the perfect family. And I tried to be that for you, but inside I was suffocating. I didn't know how to escape it, and then Victor came into my life. He gave me a way out, even if it was the wrong way." Her voice trembled as she spoke, and Michael could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed facade. Rachel had always been strong, always seemed in control, but now, in front of him, she was broken, shattered by her own choices. "I was scared, Michael," Rachel continued, her voice barely audible. "I was scared of losing everything, the life we had, the kids, you, but I couldn't keep living a lie. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when I was drowning inside. I never wanted you to know this. I didn't want to destroy you, but I did. I know that now." Michael stood there in silence, his heart heavy with a mixture of emotions. He didn't know what to say anymore. Every word Rachel spoke dug a deeper hole in his chest, leaving him breathless, struggling to catch his bearings. His mind screamed at him to walk away, to leave this behind, to never look back. But his heart still loved her. He had loved her for so long, and now he was faced with the unthinkable. How could he reconcile the woman he had shared his life with, the woman who had been his everything, with the woman standing before him now, confessing to a life he had never known? Rachel's voice broke through his thoughts, her words fragile but desperate. "I never wanted it to end this way, Michael. I never wanted to lose you, but I can't go on like this anymore. I've ruined everything. I've destroyed the one thing I ever cared about." Michael stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. He didn't know what he was expecting, some grand gesture, some plea for forgiveness, but there was nothing. Rachel had already given him all her reasons, and still none of it made the pain in his heart go away. "Rachel," Michael whispered, his voice cracked. He opened his mouth to speak, to say something that would make sense of it all, but before he could continue, Rachel turned her gaze away from him. She picked up a small object from the table, a bottle of pills, almost invisible against the backdrop of the dark room. Michael's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. He stepped toward her, reaching out, but it was too late. Rachel had already made her decision. "Please," Michael begged, his voice shaking. "Rachel, don't do this. We can fix this. We can make it work. Please, just stay." But Rachel didn't respond. She didn't even look up at him. She simply closed her eyes, as if surrendering to the weight of her own decisions. In that moment, Michael understood. There was no fixing this, no healing the wounds Rachel had inflicted on herself and on him. She had already made up her mind. The weight of her secrets, the guilt, the burden she had carried for so long, It had broken her in ways Michael could never have imagined. What do you think Michael should have done? Is there any way to come back from this level of betrayal? Reflect on forgiveness and trust in your relationships. How do you rebuild after something like this? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. The days following Rachel's death were a blur of grief, disbelief, and unanswered questions. Michael found himself in a haze, his mind trying to process the tragedy that had shattered his life. The woman he had shared 30 years of marriage with was gone, her secrets now laid bare in the wake of her tragic end. He had thought he knew everything about Rachel, but now, as the dust settled, he realized how little he had truly understood her. The hardest part was not just dealing with his own grief, but the fallout from Rachel's death. Their children, Liam and Sophie, were left to navigate a world without their mother, their once unshakable sense of stability upended. They had always looked to Rachel as the foundation of their family, the pillar that held everything together. Now, they were faced with the painful truth. Their mother had lived a life far different from the one they had known. Michael's heart broke as he watched his children struggle to understand the depths of the situation. How could he explain the truth to them? How could he tell them that the woman they had loved, the woman who had seemed so perfect, had been hiding a world of lies? They deserved the truth, but Michael didn't know how to make them understand, or how to make sense of it himself. The guilt that plagued him was almost unbearable. Could he have done something differently? Should he have seen the signs? He questioned his own role in their fractured marriage, wondering if his busy career, his constant focus on work, had pushed Rachel further into a life of deception. But deep down, Michael knew the truth. Rachel had made her choices, and no amount of second-guessing would change that. Still, the weight of her secrets haunted him. How could he have loved someone so completely, only to realize that love had been built on a foundation of lies? As the weeks passed, Michael tried to piece together the remnants of his life, but it felt like a constant uphill battle. He found himself alone in their home, the silence deafening. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. The memories of their life together were bittersweet, tainted by the truth of Rachel's betrayal. He could still see her in every room, hear her voice in the halls, but it was no longer the comforting presence it once had been. It was as though he was living with a ghost, haunted by the memories of a woman he thought he knew, but now realized he hadn't truly understood at all. The hardest truth for Michael to accept was that Rachel's death had left a void that couldn't be filled. No amount of time or healing could erase the scars she had left behind. He would never get the answers he needed, never fully understand why she had made the choices she did. All he had were the shattered pieces of their life, a puzzle that would never come together again. But through the pain, Michael began to see the lessons that Rachel's secrets had revealed. The dangers of living a double life, of keeping secrets that fester and grow, were clear. Rachel had been living in the shadows for years, hiding her true self from the people who loved her the most. The cost of that secrecy had been her life, and Michael's entire world had crumbled because of it. The lesson was painfully obvious. Honesty and trust are the foundation of any relationship. Without them, everything else falls apart. Secrets, no matter how well hidden, eventually come to the surface, and when they do, the damage is often irreparable. Rachel had spent years trying to live up to an ideal, trying to be someone she wasn't, and in the end, it had destroyed her and everyone around her. Michael's struggle to rebuild his life, to heal from the wounds left by Rachel's betrayal, was just beginning. But as painful as it was, he knew he had to move forward, for himself and for his children. They needed him now more than ever. The road ahead would be long, and the scars would never fully fade. But Michael had learned the importance of truth in relationships. He would carry that lesson with him, knowing that no matter how painful it was, the truth was always better than living in the shadows. How do you rebuild trust after betrayal? What lessons can we take from stories like this about honesty in relationships? Reflect on the importance of truth and trust in your own relationships. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more stories like this. As we come to the end of Michael and Rachel's tragic story, we are left with more than just the aftermath of a betrayal. we are left with profound lessons about trust, secrecy, and the consequences of living a life built on lies. At the heart of this story is the painful truth that no matter how carefully we craft our lives, if there are cracks beneath the surface, they will eventually show. Michael trusted Rachel with everything: his love, his life, and his family. He believed that their bond was unbreakable, that they shared a life built on mutual respect and loyalty. But Rachel's secrets shattered that trust. Her affair, the criminal activities she had hidden from him, the lies that went on for years, these were the choices that led to her tragic end. Rachel's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of keeping secrets, of living a life that isn't true to oneself. In trying to live up to an ideal, she became someone she wasn't, someone who eventually lost everything in the process. Her death left Michael with more questions than answers, and a family torn apart by the revelation of who Rachel truly was. The most painful part of the story isn't just Rachel's betrayal, but the impact it had on Michael and their children. The emotional toll of living with deception and the shattering of trust leaves scars that may never heal. Michael's struggle to understand the woman he thought he knew is a reminder that even the closest relationships can be built on fragile foundations. Trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild, and the consequences of betrayal ripple through every part of a person's life. But as painful as this story is, it also teaches us something vital: the importance of truth. It's easy to think that secrets can be kept, that lies can go unnoticed, but eventually the truth finds its way to the surface. In relationships, honesty isn't just important, it's the foundation on which everything else is built. When that foundation is broken, the damage can be irreparable. As we reflect on Michael's journey, we are left to wonder, what could he have done differently? Should he have seen the warning signs earlier? Should he have trusted his instincts when things started to feel off? Could he have saved his marriage, or was it always destined to fall apart? But the real question is, what would you have done in Michael's shoes? Would you have confronted Rachel earlier? Would you have been able to forgive her for the years of deception? Or would you have walked away the moment the truth came to light? These are difficult questions to answer, and every person's response will be different. Betrayal is a complicated thing, and how we react to it is deeply personal. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal in your life? How did you deal with it? Do you think trust can be rebuilt after such a deep betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about the tough questions that we often avoid. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this, stories that explore the fragile nature of trust, the complexities of relationships, and the consequences of living in a world full of secrets. Each case holds valuable lessons, and I can't wait to dive deeper into these themes with you. Stay tuned for our next story, where we will explore another case that challenges everything we know about love, trust, and betrayal. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.